Alright, this is a question that has come up a couple of times during live streams, and it might make for an entertaining video. So imagine for a moment that all guns disappeared. If you're vehemently anti-gun, don't get too warm and wet in your panties, because this is never going to happen in practical terms. Pandora's box has been opened, the cat is out of the bag. However you want to look at it, firearms are here to stay. Even if you completely banned all of them at once, people would always smuggle them, make them themselves, etc., etc. So they're here to stay. But just for the sake of the thought experiment, or whatever you want to call it, let's assume they just all magically vanished without a trace. So now people who currently carry firearms for personal protection would want to carry something else. And of course, some people already carry knives, batons, bear spray, a variety of other things, stun guns, canes, things like that. Already carry them for self-defense. In fact, some people might even carry swords, who knows? So if everything shifted, and if society now considered swords to be generally acceptable to carry for protection, or any other large blades, what would people carry? Now, of course, we can look back at history and see what did people carry for civilian self-defense as opposed to battlefield use. Something like this, perhaps. This is from Talhoffer's manual. I'm not aware of any finds in museums of bucklers just like this, but there are, of course, a variety of other bucklers, and people did carry swords and bucklers for defense. Bucklers rather than shields, because they're just a lot easier to carry without too much inconvenience. I mean, it's still going to be inconvenient, let's face it. It's still going to be a hunk of steel on your hip, plus the sword on your hip, which has a certain length. Rapiers and side swords, of course, were used for that purpose. Sabers, small swords, quite a large variety of different weapons. Which of those would they pick nowadays? I don't think something like this would necessarily come into fashion again. At least, I mean, would I want to carry a sword like this? Well, if there is a high risk that I might end up being attacked by somebody with a knife or a machete, say, then yeah, I would absolutely want to have something like this, because it gives you more reach, it keeps you safer, it has more defensive capabilities, all of that. But is that really worth carrying on a daily basis? I mean, most people for defense carry a handgun, not a rifle or a shotgun. And in fact, some people like to carry the smallest, most compact firearm they can get, just for comfort, concealability, things like that. But let's assume open carry, so concealability is not a factor. Of course, large knives would be pretty handy. You can fight with them, you can use them for everyday purposes, whatever cutting tasks that are at hand, from opening boxes to cutting ropes to, cutting free an entangled animal that you come upon in the woods. Who knows what? There are lots of different purposes, camping, bushcraft, etc. And there's a number of designs that are suitable for fighting. You could have something like this with a D-guard that can be used for striking or punching as well, or a sickle knife. This could be quite a deterrent, as well as a useful weapon and a tool. Then, of course, there are various blunt weapons, clubs, canes, walking sticks, etc., that can have dual purpose, like as a walking stick or a cane, or it can be just a weapon, like this club here. Axes, anything from a small belt hatchet to various sized axes and tomahawks. Again, this would be a useful tool. Outdoors, at least, in city not so much. But this would make for quite an effective weapon in a lot of different ways. You can hook with it, you can choke up and down, you can punch with it. Close quarters, you have a lot of impact force, and they aren't terribly inconvenient to carry. If you have a good sheath for it, you can have it on your belt. Most of the mass is right there on your belt. The rest is just kind of sticking out and just kind of hanging there. It's not as limiting as a sword. You know, if you have a sword with a very long blade, it's going to stick out more. Really, the largest sword that I could imagine any significant number of people carrying on a regular basis would be something like this. A katana, or similar size. This here is a katana longsword hybrid. An older model made by Windlass Steelcrafts is actually double-edged. So this is not terribly long or heavy, and you can carry this on your hip. You can draw it without too much problem, even in confined spaces. And of course, it would be quite an advantage to be able to use something with both hands. But again, this is still quite a piece of metal to carry around. So a wakizashi might be a better choice. Also, many weapons that originate from jungle environments, which were designed for use in confined spaces, like many Filipino swords, for example. A medieval German messer would also be a viable option. These come in different sizes. There's also the so-called Bauernwehr, or peasant's defense, which is really more the knife-sized version of this. I mean, messer means knife, but this here is really more of a sword, even though it has some knife characteristics, like the handle construction. But yeah, so you could very much have a shorter, more compact version of this, and these are quite versatile. You have a grip that's long enough to be used with two hands, even though they were typically used with one hand. You've got an additional guard here, and they cut quite well. And of course, there are non-firearm projectile weapons. So you might see something like a slingshot, blowguns even, perhaps, throwing knives, throwing axes, things like that, shuriken. But the thing that I would most commonly expect to see in such a scenario would be the good old machete. Because, I mean, they're affordable, they're reliable, well, not the absolute cheapest ones, but there's plenty of high-quality ones that won't cost you an arm and a leg. They have lots of cutting power, they're ubiquitous, easy to find, they are versatile, they have lots of tool applications and all of that. So especially in the beginning, like if things just like firearms just mysteriously vanished overnight, literally, a lot of people would, like, the first thing they have would be something like this. You know, aside from improvised weapons, of course, like, you know, baseball bats and cricket bats and things like that. But I think you would see quite a lot of machetes. And in some parts of the world, machete fighting is still kept alive as a tradition. If you're going to a party or a ball, maybe even, you might carry a small sword. You know, I would definitely expect there to be different fashion options, basically, because that's what happened in history. And if carrying swords became generally acceptable in society, it would absolutely also become a fashion item again. You would see a number of, you know, highly decorated ornamental small swords and lightsabers and things like that, because people would want to show off like they always do. All right, so what would I personally carry in this situation? It depends on where I'm going. If I'm out in the woods, for example, I would very much like to have something like this, a kukri or an axe, something that you can use for a lot of different tool applications. If I'm, let's say if I'm downtown where there's more people and there's a greater chance of bumping into somebody who doesn't like your face or wants to have what you have, I think I would go with the messer, because that's the largest that I'd say you can fairly comfortably carry, and it would give you quite an advantage against a lot of other things that people might carry. Maybe do have a buckler in addition. It depends on how much else you carry, you know, what you want to do. I mean, if you're going to go bungee jumping or whatever, you're not going to bring your two-handed greatsword. So I hope you found this amusing, this thought to entertain, and thanks for watching. Also check out the links down below to Patreon, Subscribestar, Amazon, Kult of Athena, blah, 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 blah. All the good stuff. So have a good one, folks. Stay safe and pick the appropriate tool for the task.